With your host, Chuck Harold, SecurityGuideTV.com, SecurityGuideRadio.com, and ASISTV.org. I got it all in one breath. Pretty good, Tim. Not bad, right?
Not bad.
All right. Now, what's your name, sir?
David Feeney.
And what's your name?
Tim McCrate.
And what are we going to talk about today?
ESRM.
ESRM. Now, for my people that don't know the acronym, tell us what that means.
ESRM stands for Enterprise Security Risk Management.
Now, this is, it's not new, right?
No,
but it's getting more popular. People are grabbing the idea, they're understanding it. Define what that means to people, and we'll start the conversation right there.
Sure. The ESRM guideline definition
Bring your mic a little close for me.
Is that ESRM, Enterprise Security Risk Management, is a strategic approach to security management that ties the security practice to the mission and goals of the organization.
Right.
And uses established and accepted risk management principles.
I think what we're seeing is a lot of our practitioners have been using an ESRM-based approach for a number of years. They just didn't know what to call it.
That's a good point.
And
That's
what
right.
we've done with the framework and with the guideline that we've created is actually given some structure regarding the work that we've probably already been doing and some of the components you may already have in place in your organization.
So, if you take out the E, and we just had the SRM, right? At a lower level, a security department might be running that way. If you take out the S, it was risk management.
Correct.
Right, so we're kind of going backwards with the risk management model up into the C-suite with this, and it makes perfectly good sense. And what I find in some of these organizations is we have a mission statement that has nothing to do with operations.
Absolutely.
And that's where it all kind of falls apart.
Absolutely. I think that's where we find that the link that we're creating now with the approach from an ESRM perspective is that we're linking everything we're doing from the security operations, from the security department, right up through to demonstrating how we're supporting the business objectives. I think that's key for us.
Yeah, that's right. I think that when we're engaging with asset owners and other stakeholders, as much as we're able to say, we want what you want, now tell us what you want, tell us what's important to you, and we will tell you how we can help from a risk management perspective. The more we can have that conversation instead of like, well, this is what you have to do, particularly without a why,
Right.
we're going to have more success.
So we're finding that security is more and more in the C-suite.
It is.
It's right there because how you function in security affects my profits, my loss, it affects all those kind of things. Are security organizations internally being viewed as not a profit center, but are they being viewed not as a cost center?
I think that's true. I mean, I'm looking at my current organization, and I think the value that we bring to my organization is that we're here to ensure that both our citizens, our employees, and the folks that represent my organization are safe and secure, that we have an opportunity to identify what are the strategic objectives that we want to achieve on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, yearly basis. What are the assets you need to be successful, and how can my team and my program help reduce the risk facing the assets? So, correct, it's always going to be a line item cost. We're always going to cost some money for the organization. But what if, when we talk to the business, when you're looking at it from our perspective, we can actually help identify what's the risks facing the organization and offer you opportunities to reduce that risk?
Yeah, I'd say that to add to that, security is arguably a cost center in the same way that IT is a cost center. So why does IT have so much more bandwidth, pardon the pun, when it comes to budget? Why is it so much easier than
they
we
get
dollars?
the bling bling, they're the heroes, all this kind of
Always.
stuff. It's the same thing.
And the answer is that the connection between their dollars and driving the mission is much clearer. So there's much more willingness to invest in that way because the connection has been made between you want to do X, you need this technology in order to do that. Got it, okay, good. So what we can learn from that, I think, as security practitioners and try as best we can to tie that directly to the mission. And over time, maybe, ESRM does other things to help build a strong security culture. That culture can kind of move us into that type of lens, the same type of lens that executives and asset owners see IT.
So we're in absolutely the worst medium to describe what we're doing here because I don't have a PowerPoint, I don't have a flow chart or a pyramid.
Exactly, yeah.
Right, but let's try and turn this into a visualization. Let's make it a pyramid, right? Some people will do an inverted pyramid, and they will say that really my base operation guys, my guard, the first guy you see in the organization for most places is the security guard. He's your base, right?
Correct.
Question is, how does he get his data back up to the top, the C-suite, which is actually back up to the mission, and align his performance with the mission and the objective? And this is really the kind of the cycle we have to describe for people.
Sure.
And it's not as easy to do as it sounds. Oh, just put out a memo, tell the guard to send a memo upstairs, we're going to analyze that. It's not It's not about that. It's about behavior, right?
It is about behavior. So here's what we've done, at least in my current organization. Here was one of the challenges, is let's look at this from a risk-based perspective. And did you know that every time you walk out on the floor as a security officer representing my organization, you're actually conducting a mini risk assessment? Perfect.
Right.
So what if I take that mindset now and I look at it, well, where else can I reduce risk? What if I get ahead of the problem and I use the data that I've currently saved for about a year, 2 years, 3 years? I become predictive in my review, identify potential risks, and I mitigate it by putting in a control in place, which could be I'm going to change or alter the pattern of my patrol approach and be patrolling with a purpose. That's what we've done in our organization, and that's one of the clearest demonstrations of how an ESRM-based approach for just one simple set of tasks can directly impact achieving the objective within the organization. Because now the perception is, with a 30 to 50% drop of that type of activity being documented and identified,
Right.
now how do you feel when you come into our building, when you use our facilities, when you come and look at what we have to offer as a service? Citizens feel better coming in, and so do our employees. So it works.
Yeah, it's a great answer. The word that stuck out there to me is purpose or value. You know, the security officer has to understand their purpose and their value, tied back to the mission and the goals, the strategic direction of the company. And then the stakeholders, the asset owners and the stakeholders in that security officer also need to understand.
Let's talk about ownership. Who owns this process? And what I find is two things that make the security organization fail. Somebody doesn't own it, doesn't own the whole thing completely, and then there's failure to act. In other words, you're not letting your line people make independent decisions to fulfill the mission. They're waiting for somebody to give approval, and everything stops and it freezes. So in this model, there are some designated people, and it's not about your title. It's not about VP or senior or anything like that. It's about who's going to own it.
Good question. And that's always the one we struggle with, is the question I will always ask organizations, whether I'm designing a program for my current organization or as a consultant, the question will always be, who owns the risk? And it's the
Right.
asset owner is the one who typically owns the risk, or the one who owns the business objective. And if
Okay.
it's the executive team that set the business objective and I find a risk that's going to potentially impact that, that's the team that has to sign off on the risk. So the acceptance at that level is this going to impact the business objective? Who's the business objective owner, or who wrote the statement that looks really pretty on the website? That's the one I want to talk to.
All right. What are some of the advances for 2019? How is ESRM looking differently than it did a few years ago?
I think right now what we've done is we've actually matured the process. So what David and team have done with the actual guideline itself is now we've actually codified what we've been talking about since 2015 when we brought ESRM back as a strategic imperative for ASIS. We've put a structure behind it now, and all of the courses that you're going to see here this week, and also what you're seeing from each one of the people who are talking about ESRM, is based on that guideline. And I think that's key, is that we're now creating that structure behind it.
Brian, talk about how some of these things might tie into other standards, maybe ISO, right? Maybe some other ASIS guidelines. How does that merge? Because boy, if you can merge those things, you have one heck of a successful organization.
Yeah, I think we're focusing on alignment. So ASIS is now a liaison member to ISO, and we have people sitting at the table talking about several different standards that they're working on. One is security architecture, which is a global term, but kind of means security program. They would get mad at me for saying that, but we'll look at it that way. And there's a lot of alignment between ESRM and the content of that standard, which, to be clear, is not available yet. Such that when you pick up that standard when it's available and read it, you'll think, this is very much like ESRM. We've kind of resigned ourselves to alignment instead of standardization globally, right? Like, not every single person is going to use the same words. We're never going to get the cyber people to stop talking
Right.
about NIST.
No,
you know?
but it makes sense.
And
the
that's
goal
all-
is alignment at the
That's
end.
right.
Yeah.
So
Goals
we've
alignment,
accepted
you
that,
bet.
and we've said, okay, let's make sure that we're aligned, so that no matter which one of these things you pick up, you understand how it aligns with and how it fits with everything else.
Tell me how it looks. I mean, it's not like a flow chart, but what's it going to look like to the average person that wants to start building this?
So the way I've always described it is this is a circle. And it starts at the very top with the business setting the objectives, the goals, and what I have to achieve to be successful and stay in business. Then next to the side of it, if I go around the circle, what are the assets that I need to support that business? What are the risks that are facing the assets is the next part. And then finally, what's the mitigation? And inside of that circle is what we as security professionals, we own that. It's the incident response, continuous improvement, and how do I take all of my learnings and bring it back into that circle so it's an ongoing iterative approach. That's one of the best ways I've used to describe it, and it works really well with executives.
Does it work well with IT people?
Good question.
Because physical and cybersecurity are working better together.
They are.
One argument is, guess what? There's no such thing as physical security because everything's an endpoint on the network and everything's the Internet of Things, and therefore it's all cyber. The other argument is, guess what? Some human being programmed the virus. Some human being got into your data center, right? So it's really got to be both. But I'm not sure if that model works on the cyber side, but it should work on the cyber side.
Yeah, I would say that it does. I would say that you have many of the same challenges. So let me take a step back. One of the components of the foundation of ESRM in the guideline is holistic risk management. And part of that is considering all security risk, like whatever is available to you in your domain or your responsibility or jurisdiction. That's the scope of where ESRM can apply. So with that said, you'll have you'll have several of the same challenges that you've always had, like the convergence people have had in trying to bring physical and cyber people together, and that they're very different people. They need to understand the value of each other's function, right? So all that stuff is going to be important. If you're able to achieve that and convey that and instill the value in these people, then explain the commonality and how, cyber people, tell me what you use. Well, we use NIST CSF as our framework. Great. Let me tell you how ESRM can embolden that. Not replace it. It's
Right.
not a framework,
Yep.
right? So you got frameworks, that's great. You got a methodology, that's great. We're not trying to be any of that. ESRM, if you were to assign a noun to it, is just an approach. It's just a way to be more successful, a more successful security risk manager in whatever domain or jurisdiction.
I like it. It sounds good. Now, anybody got any questions for me out here in the audience, maybe? Anybody want to talk about? I know someone there. I knew we had one. There he is. All right. Here's your mic right here.
Thank you. Tim, if you were to
Can you turn that mic up a little bit? Yeah, go ahead.
if you were to walk into the Acme Dynamite Company and they have no idea what ESRM is, they've never been to an ASIS seminar, et cetera, and they've had a security program in place at that company for years,
Sure.
how would you convince them that ESRM is the right way to go? How do you get them to open up their mind and listen to what we're trying to do?
Sure, so good question. So how would I take an existing program that they've never come here to GSX, haven't sat in any of our classes, haven't read the framework? One of the things I would ask first, if I was sitting down either to the security director or particularly to the executives for the organization, is the first question I'd start and ask is, so what do you do? What's the business that you do? What are you trying to achieve as a corporation, or what's your goal as an organization? What are the objectives you're trying to achieve today, a year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now? And do you know, with those things you want to try to achieve, what assets do you need? What people, property, information do you need to be successful? And if they can identify that for me, which many companies can, but not everybody can, if they can work with you on that, the next question is, what if there was a risk facing one of those assets? How much would that impact your business? What if I could help you reduce that risk? And that's where the conversation starts. So it really becomes a business discussion and a business decision first, as opposed to a security requirement. It changes the dynamic and it changes that conversational tone with the business, because I'm actually here as a trusted advisor to support you and your goals, as opposed to forcing what we talked about, forcing some type of framework or a regulatory requirement or regime upon you just because security said so. We don't have that right anymore. Our job as trusted advisors is to provide you that opportunity to talk about your business. How do you want to be successful? But more importantly, if we find a risk, how can we work with you to reduce it? Does that help? Okay.
Fantastic. ESRM advances in 2019 here at GSX 2019 in Chicago, live with Chuck Harold, SecurityGuideTV.com, SecurityRadio.com, and ASISTV.org. My friends, always good to see you guys.
Thanks, Chuck.
Thank you
Thanks for
very
coming
much.
on the show.
Thanks.
Back in a minute to hear some more information live from GSX.